Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mahwash Ajaz. You're watching me on Daily Diary with Mahwash Ajaz on Ocean News UK. Thank you so much for the great feedback you guys gave me on my last show, where we discussed a lot of topics. We talked about having an inclusive Bollywood. We talked about why that age of Bollywood is gone. We talked about mental health and how it affects diaspora parents and how diaspora parents tend to look at it differently from, say, the local communities. We're back with another thought provoking topic. But before I get into the topic, I do request everyone to subscribe to Ocean News, to log on to their social media and follow us there and leave us with your feedback. And if you want to be a part of the show, do let us know, do message us on Ocean News UK's social media channels. Now, what are we talking about today? Another important topic. And again, a topic which I think people look at it cursorily, in a very cursory way, but then they don't really go into the depths of it. Does art need to be politically correct in an era where everybody has an opinion and everybody's on social media and everyone has a thought that they want to share through all these different social media channels? Like I just asked you now, share with us your feedback. What do you think we should be talking about? A flip side to that is that there is a lot of overcorrectness sometimes that happens. Similarly, there's a lot of correctness that is in place that wasn't in place before. To talk with me about this today, whether art in itself needs to be politically correct, does it need to bow down to the zeitgeist? And the zeitgeist these days is very, very all about political correctness. A lot of times artists feel policed, that they really want to tell one story, but social media or overall media wants to push them in a certain direction. Joining me talking about this topic is Sahar Khan. Sahar, first of all, thank you so much for joining us.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
Is it Sahar? Is it Seher? How am I supposed to say your name?
I'm usually called Seher,
Okay,
though
great
I'm
way to
used to
start.
both.
Great way to start a politically correct conversation. How do I pronounce your name? All right. So, so Seher, what I first I want to introduce you to our guests, our audiences. Guys, Seher is somebody who you have known. Believe me, you know her. You just don't know you know her. हर चीज मीज़ान में अच्छी लगती है. रोज रोज good milk पिया करो. These are slogans that Seher's team and Seher came up with, and Seher was behind the mastermind behind these very, very catchy, very, very memorable slogans. Seher is an instinctive storyteller. She's studied from the Karachi School of Art. I'll let her tell you more about her herself. But before we get into the conversation, I do want you to know that the reason why we brought somebody like Seher on board for this conversation is that we need to know how storytellers are thinking. What are the pressures that they're under, whether it's in advertising, whether it's in media, whether they're trying to write movies or books or songs. What is it that goes on their side of the brain and on that side of the border? So, Seher, tell me first about yourself. Why did you come into storytelling? What was inside you that made you be a storyteller? Tell us a little bit about your journey.
Well, to recap, how I got into this career or how I got into the creative sides or arts is because I guess ever since I was a kid, I was more of a creative, expressive person, and my parents always encouraged me to come out and express myself in whichever way I wanted. I used to write for Young World. I used to write for Daily News, etc., etc. When I was just in grade 7 or grade 6, that's how I started. After that, you know, opportunities started coming my way. People started finding me and asking me to write stories or read stories for them. Advertising is something that I had to look for because when I got into this field, not very many women were choosing advertising as a career,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of ad agencies. So I've been around for almost 3 decades in this industry now. So 3 decades ago, you can imagine कि लड़कियों के बारे में क्या सोचा जाता था जो advertising industry में जाना चाहती थी. तो उसके लिए I had to, like rely on my parents, and of course they are the ones who supported me. There were questions
Mm-hmm.
asked, there were, objections placed from different family members who are influencers in this entire, the way our society works. But I guess
Yeah.
my father stood up for me, my mother stood up for me, and that's how I got into advertising. And once I was here, I made sure that, they're proud of me. So that's how I got
Sure,
where I am today.
I'm sure they're proud of you. Sarah, coming to the topic at hand we have today, you're a storyteller. You've been in the business for quite a while. You've known the ins and outs, and you've seen the digital transformation of the industry, just like every other industry is now on a different path than, let's say, any other industry was, let's say, 20 years ago. When it comes to political correctness, when it comes to how audiences view certain type of things, like maybe 20 years ago when you created an ad or when you wanted to tell a certain story for any demographic really, are there similar pressures? Are Is it just like, oh no, there was a different kind of pressure then and there's a different kind of pressure now? Or do you feel like it's gotten way more difficult to tell a story without, oh, am I offending this group? Am I, is this group going to take my content positively? How does the challenge work versus then and now?
So I guess at that point in time, there was a lot of self censorship because
Mm.
you really had to think about what you're showing or what you're
It was
thinking
on
or how
your
you're
shoulders.
telling the story, how you frame it was completely, a lot of self censorship was there. We
Hmm.
were more morally and ethically responsible for what we were putting forward. Uh, these days, like you mentioned in the introduction, also, everybody has access to the social media, everybody has access to digital media, and they're more than welcome to express themselves in whichever way they want.
Hmm.
um, so there's this thin line between between freedom of speech and empathy. So you
Hmm.
you can actually, you have to walk that line
Hmm.
always,
Hmm.
regardless of whether it was in the past or it's in the now or it's in the
Hmm.
future. The
Hmm.
job of a creative person is to walk that thin line always. You
Yeah.
have to be free, you have to express yourself, you have to question the norms, you have to challenge the beliefs, but without ethically uh, marginalizing someone or
Hmm.
morally offending someone. So that line has to be there. And I guess that pressure at that point in time or at the in the modern times is the same. It's not
Hmm.
any different. Just
Hmm.
the way we express it has evolved.
Evolved. Sir, what happens sometimes is that today, when we are creating stories, there's also different agendas at play. So sometimes you know that certain agendas are being used by one group, they are pushed by one group, and you know that it's not really the reality, but it is a push. And very rightly, you pointed out there's a difference between freedom of speech and empathy. Do you feel like sometimes you need to kind of cross that line and say things you need to say? Regardless of the backlash? Do you feel like that is something that more people are doing or more people need to do?
It depends. Is the topic of or the industry that we are reviewing today revolves around the arts?
Hmm.
I think that artists are, generally speaking, there's two types of artists. So they're either conformists who are, feeding from culture and repainting and reinforcing that culture in their work.
Right. Well said.
And there
Yes.
are artists who challenge what's happening
The
and they
norm.
seek the truth and they feel that their personal opinion is important. So
Hmm.
when we look at it from that lens, I would say that it's just these two choices that we've always had as artists and we will
Hmm.
always continue to have. And it depends upon which side you're on, whether if you're
Hmm.
brave enough to come out and say the truth that you believe is true, or if you're a conformist and you just want to paint landscapes and you want to write about romance or stuff like that, then that's you, and that's, I mean, equally respectable. It's your
Hmm.
expression.
But sir, when we say that somebody is a conformist, when we are under pressure, sometimes conformists tend to be the foot soldiers of something terrible also. And there is
Yes.
also that artists are only going to say the right thing and the best thing. And I'm so glad you pointed out the bifurcation between a artist who challenges the norms and an artist who conforms. So I'm so glad you said that, because that is a differentiation we all need to make, because I don't think we need to expect that all artists are going to always stand up for the right thing.
Yeah.
When it comes to the big stuff, and when you are challenged with something like, oh, now this is something I can't stay silent about. Like a lot of Taylor Swift's fans were up in arms that she has never spoken about what's happening in Gaza. And similarly, there's a similar backlash that comes to Bollywood as well, that Bollywood usually
Yeah.
stays silent. What are the industry frameworks in which you think that artists are more free to speak, even though you have these two different polar opposites? And Taylor is so vocal about so many things. She was very anti-Trump during a time. What do you think is really required for artists who want to speak up but then cannot? Is it their personal choices that matter more, or is it? Do you think it's the environment that influences them mostly?
I would always say it's the personal choice because I guess for an artist, expression is a form of the only form of communication we know. So it
Mm,
can be art, it can be poetry, it can be literature, it can be performing art or whatever, advertising, etc., etc. The medium does not matter. So keep that aside. So that's what has changed. Nothing else has, right? So medium has changed. Keep that aside. Then society does not matter to an artist because more or less your first client or your first critique is yourself. When you're an artist, you're actually, I mean, Da Vinci stayed with the Mona Lisa till he died because he was trying to perfect it, right? So he kept it for more than 16 years with himself. So
mm,
for an artist, first he has to be happy with what he has produced. So I guess that society is something secondary to us as well. So
mm,
it
mm,
boils down to a personal choice. So your personal choice is whether you want to speak up or you want to stay quiet. And that's about it. If you want to speak up, honestly, artists would find like minded artists, and something as great as a renaissance might happen,
mm, mm.
right?
So if you
So
can,
it's
you
it's a personal choice. There's no
personal
society.
choice.
You choose your society, you choose your friends. I mean, family is the only social pressure you're born with. Everything else, your work, your colleagues, your friends, your everything else is somebody you choose.
Everything else is a choice. On that note, we're going to take a short break. We'll come back with Seher joining us, talking about whether art should be politically correct or not, or whether artists should bow down to political correctness. Don't go away. Come right back. We'll catch you with this topic real soon. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Daily Diary with Mahwash Ajaz. We're discussing political correctness and art and the relationship between the two with Seher Khan, who's a storyteller. She's got a massive career in advertising. Great slogans that she's come up with include "Har cheez mizan mein achhi lagti hai," "Roz roz good milk piya karo," and she's given us such great nuggets to think about. That there are artists who conform and there are artists who challenge the norm. Seher, coming back to our conversation. Before we begin to the next leg of the conversation, I also want you to shed light on this, that artists are a soft target, oftentimes, especially in Pakistan or especially in some of our South Asian communities, where the first finger of blame goes to the artist. In such climates and in such situations, is it natural for artists to take a step back? And the reason I'm asking you, I'm not really considering you some kind of like a representative for all
Yeah,
artists, but from
yeah.
your point of view, from what you've observed and what you must have seen when you must have been behind those closed doors where those meetings happen, tell the world that is it like, do artists genuinely get afraid and terrified and get ginger of speaking up? Sometimes the fear comes from, you know what, it's not possible for me to speak about everything, so why do I need to say
Yeah,
things? Your take.
yeah. I think, Mavish, that a lot of it is the society that, like, if I speak from my experience or my circles, a lot of it is also the society that we're living in, and we've been taught complacency since the very start. And regardless of whether you're an artist or a doctor or an engineer, आपको क्या बड़े होके डॉक्टर इंजीनियर बनना है से लेके जब बचपन से शुरू होती है कहानी, it's always complacency and like look the other way if something wrong is happening, ignore it, move on, etc., etc. So that's what we've grown up with, and also the the things that we have been through as a nation, I guess, has bred in us certain survival instincts, which probably are not universally true for all artists around the world. So yes, when you talk about being challenged or being told off or being you know um, pointed a finger at, a lot of artists do step back because like you're right that हम लोग डर जाते हैं कभी कभी कि हाँ शायद like this might get us into a territory
More
where
trouble.
we don't want to go.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. But sir, is it also not there that across the world there's so many different artists who just don't talk about it? Like I give the example of Taylor Swift and a lot of other artists who sometimes don't really understand the situation, and then their PR teams kind of advise them that, hey, you know what, just don't get into it, just don't get involved,
Yeah,
try to focus on your own thing. Is it just related to Pakistan? Although I do understand your point about Pakistan, because in Pakistan, we do build kind of silos for ourselves. We do have little pockets where people protect their peace and they try to live within those frameworks, and then they don't
yeah,
like don't bother me, I won't bother you. Especially I'm from
yeah,
Karachi. So I've noticed that in Karachi as well. That
yeah.
in Karachi you have these little things where everything is happening, but people are like, okay, don't bother us and we won't bother you. So
Yeah.
tell me about, what do you think? Like you said, it's not universally true, but then what is universally true for artists? Because I've seen this in Hollywood, I've seen this in Bollywood. In Bollywood, which is such a powerful industry, you've got an artist like Shah Rukh Khan who willfully toes its government, his government agenda,
Yeah,
and you have
yeah,
artists like Amir Khan who, when spoke up and said India is not safe for people, there
yeah,
was a massive backlash. Or even something
yeah,
as small as Saif Ali Khan naming his child with a Muslim name, a Muslim Mughal ruler's
yeah,
name.
yeah,
He like, next time I'm not telling the world what, maybe his child's name is Jahazeb and he's not telling the world that the world
yeah.
in calling him Jay. So what's your take on the universal principles of morality or political correctness?
Okay, so I would like to break this down into types of arts then, because the examples that you've given are from the spotlight and they're celebrities and they are actually performing artists. So they're
This is
definitely,
relevant.
being
Yeah,
watched 24/7, and each
yeah,
word that they say holds some significance for somebody, and they have to justify it, why they said it, what they said, where they were,
yeah,
what they were wearing,
absolutely.
what goes on in their house is also public property, people invade their privacies, etc., etc. So that sort of art has a lot of impact because uh, I mean, whatever they are doing or whatever they are showing to the world is something that would be picked up faster and larger than the other artists, right? As
Fair enough.
opposed to somebody who's painting, like, let's say, a work of art, and उसकी लिमिटेड ऑडियंस होगी, लिमिटेड फॉलोइंग होगी, लिमिटेड लोग उसको इंटरप्रेट करेंगे उस तरीके से जिस तरह आर्टिस्ट wants it to be
And somebody
interpreted.
who's behind the doors, maybe somebody who's not
Yeah,
really
right.
directly in front of the
So,
camera.
so you won't see the same kind of questions being asked of directors or same kind of questions being asked of, writers or
Or a
maybe
cinematographer.
cinematographers or DOPs. They would
Hmm.
get off with pretty much doing whatever they like. But for the stars, yes, they have to be answerable to a lot of people for a lot of things that they do,
Hmm.
and that is universally true. So that
Hmm.
part of your observation is on point. That is
Yeah.
universally true, whether the east, the west, the subcontinent, whatever. That's universally true.
Hmm. But then, like I said, do you feel like there is a pressure from society? We mentioned before the break that it's about an artist's personal choice. Sometimes I feel, and I want your take on this, I feel like even if an artist personally feels that he's compelled to talk about it, he or she wants to talk about it, there are such pressures from society or from political agendas or from other different agendas where they're just like, okay, look, we want to speak up, but we can't, and our hands are tired. And that brings me to that initial point that artists do become soft targets. How do you
Yes.
think, how do you feel like as a society we can be more tolerant? Because I sometimes, when I try to speak up for artists and when I try to say that, look, please don't constantly bash them, it's ridiculous. Why do we expect our artists to do the work for which
Yeah.
we've elected officials for, right? But people are just so angry and up in arms about artists. But then they make so much money and they do this and they do that. Why are we not? Why are they not? They fly in business class and they take so much money for one advertisement. Then why is it that they are not speaking up? Is it really their responsibility? And do we really need to do better as people
I think it's not our responsibility or the stars or the performers' responsibility to speak up on everything.
on
but
everything?
i
Okay.
but I do also understand where the audiences are coming from, because sometimes people that you look up to, who are your stars or your celebs or your idols, and they say something that is, I would say, politically incorrect
Hmm.
at times. Like, for example, there was this, like, um, only recently there were a lot of exchanges of tweets across the border from from Pakistan, from India, a lot of people
Yeah.
talking about whether it's war or whether it's not war, or etc., etc. And
Mhm.
I think over there some sort of self censorship was required of the artists, where I think playing safe actually got them more backlash than coming out
Hmm.
right and supporting one side or the other would have.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay, because in case of India and Pakistan, Pakistanis were on the side of the fence that okay, we don't want war, but obviously we'll defend
Yeah,
our country, we'll stand with our
yeah.
country. And then our artists sometimes got a lot of backlash that oh, you didn't speak up for Pakistan and you gave very wishy-washy statements. My question to you is, again, is it really their job? And again, if they aren't doing it because they do command that influence, like for example, a lot of people make this argument about Taylor Swift and maybe Selena Gomez and other artists that okay, if they are not speaking up and if they can't even do like a bit of a philanthropy call, they look at how much influence they have, look at how much money they can raise
Yeah.
in this and my question is that when we look at artists, when we place this responsibility on artists, is it some psychological need inside us that we're absolving ourselves and we find a scapegoat to blame? We do because we don't know what that artist
Oh,
is
we
probably
would always
doing.
do that.
Yeah,
That has all the blame game is the, I guess, the most well played game at all times.
yeah.
And yes, we would always find somebody else to point a finger at.
Mm,
And so my take on this is simple. Like, if you are not saying anything as an artist, fine, it's not your responsibility. But
mm,
if you do choose to say something, I guess then you should choose the truth, and that's about it.
But truth can be subjective, isn't it?
It is. Truth is
Mm.
personal, truth is cultural, truth is
Political.
religious, truth is universal, right? But whatever your truth is, then, I mean, if
Stick
you're
to it.
speaking up, then you be convinced that what you're saying
Ah,
is you're on that side of the
yeah,
argument, right? So there are a
yeah.
lot of times when you're not really even convinced that what you're saying is something you want to say.
Hmm. Right. But then at this point, Seher, we also want to know if there is some kind of like line to draw. Like how much can we say that, oh, every artist needs to speak about everything, but then where do you draw the line for even people? I think this conversation that we're having should also be helpful for those people who are constantly up in arms with a pitchfork and they're like, oh, XYZ needs to say this and XYZ needs to say that, and you need to make a statement, and your statement can be better. Obviously, like you said, if that's your truth, then stick to it. Like, I think I would
Yeah,
have more respect for somebody like Kangana Ranaut who says absolute bile oriented stuff. Like, she just says horrible, terrible stuff, but she sticks to it rather than
she sticks
somebody who
to it.
she sticks to it, and
Yes,
that's the personality. We know it.
she
There is
lives
no
it, she
confusion.
sticks to it. We know it's her authentic, true statement. That's about it.
Yeah. In her head, this is what she truly feels about
Yeah,
minorities in
yeah,
Pakistan. Then I have less respect for somebody who does a lot of wishy-washy statements here, does
yes.
a lot of wishy-washy statements here. So I have a lot of less respect for somebody like that. But then at the same time, where do you draw the line that you cannot constantly be harassing and haranguing people to be doing this constantly that you need to speak up. So how can we build more tolerance in us as a people and then constantly, like we just talked about, the scapegoating of artists?
Yeah, yeah. I guess that a lot of education, a lot of so tolerance to khair is something that is by the hour, not even by the day. It's diminishing by the hour. Tolerance on any side whatsoever. So tolerance has to be taught. Tolerance has, and differing points of views have to be respected. They have to be. So one of the one of the disadvantages that I feel with all this new modern media is that
Hmm.
it's polarizing people, because the algorithm would show you what you believe in, right? So if you start watching a certain type of content or reading certain type of articles, it would just push the same your way, right? It
Yeah,
would
yeah,
just
yeah.
reinforce what you already believe, and it would
Yeah.
reinforce what I already believe, and that they could be polar opposites. So
Hmm.
I my room for thought is actually being diminished by seeing the right or the same things over and over again. Like you said, truth can be different for different people, right?
Absolutely. And it's feeding into
So,
your biases.
so
Yeah.
this tolerance has to be taught at home. I'm sorry, but artists cannot teach the nation to be more tolerant. It has to be the families, the parents who have to teach their children to be more tolerant, to look at a certain issue from different perspectives and lenses.
Mm. There was a very good study, and in or there was a good report that came out in Denmark. They taught empathy as a subject, and it led to less bullying in school. Do you think we need to teach empathy as a subject? And if we were to teach empathy, how can you talk to parents now? Like we're talking about families, and that's so critical. And as a psychologist, I completely and 100% agree. And I know it may be boring that hey, the host and the guest are both agreeing on the same topic, but I think that's such an important issue to talk about, that
Yeah.
how do we teach empathy from the cradle and to the school and to the colleges, and then later obviously when we move on into our phases of life where we're professional and we have to deal with different pressures at the workplace. But at the very basic level, if we were to teach empathy, what should we be teaching?
By example, parents are in the position to teach it by example, right? So when
Yeah.
you come across somebody who is less fortunate than yourself or less privileged than yourself, it's our job as a parent to make our children realize the fact and also do something about it and ask them what they can do to help that situation so that like things are better. Similarly, like हमारे घर के अंदर होता है, like I have a son and a daughter, and the way we've raised them, we've always told them that they can make a difference to the world, they can change the society, they can bring the change they want, and they've been able to discuss those things with us. We have our Monday meetings where we sit down and
Mm,
we talk about just like work, we have our Monday meetings and we talk about like how was your week and what would you like to change about it and stuff like that. So I
mm.
guess it has to come from good parenting. I can't think of anything else that can bring this change.
There's nothing better, but in parenting also, I think that there was a very nice quote I read once, that judge a man by how he is to people who cannot do anything for him. And I think that this is because a lot of our interactions now, even in this day and age, because life is so fast, is so transactional. We are so
Yeah.
focused on what can the other person do for me, and therefore if he can, therefore I will be nice. So these
Yeah.
kind of formulations in our brains are constantly happening. Just kind of to wrapping up this conversation, we talked about parenting. Tell me about what your experience, because you have been a trainer, you've talked to people, you've taught people how to tell stories and do these things. Let's say you were to design a course or design something for teachers on how to reduce bullying, because I think those bullies are the people who are sitting behind these keyboards and they
Yeah.
are like
Yeah. Yeah.
typing
Yeah.
furious
Keyboard
statements.
warriors are all bullies.
Yes, 100%. Or they're either silent bullies or potential bullies, or they're basically just bullies. So when we want to teach it in schools or academically, when we want to say that, okay, this is what schools need to do, what do you think? How would you take on this challenge if you were in that position?
This would require me more thinking than the 2 or 3 minutes that I have to think about this on this show. But
Yeah,
but
but just
to start
as
off,
on
to
the
start
offhand,
off,
yeah.
there has to be good examples that I can pull up and use storytelling, for example. Like in the older times, the fairy tales and folk tales are all stories that teach morals and have, right.
Yes.
So I would say storytelling is something that can engage children and can make them think, and you can make that class sort of interactive and ask them about why a character feels a certain way, what can the other character do about it, and stuff like that. If it is primary school, if it is secondary school, then you can have, let's say, maybe credits for
Hmm.
doing good and voluntary work, etc., etc.
Hmm.
And the further on you go, you can earn scholarships and do stuff. So people feel
Incentivized.
incentivized to learn empathy. And actually, it's not something that can be learned. It's something that's already in us as humans. It's
Hmm.
just that we sort of, at times lose touch with it. And at some point in time, if any of that actions can reconnect you with your human self, then I think there's nothing like it, because humans are meant to be empathetic.
Hmm. Yeah, well, that's a fantastic note to end our conversation. Although sometimes I feel that certain human beings do defy this logic that generally we're all supposed to be empathetic. But there are certain human beings which I feel aren't as
Yeah.
empathetic and it's not born with it. And that's why we call them sociopaths and psychopaths. But is there anything else you'd like to add before we say goodbye?
No, I guess we've covered pretty much everything that I would have liked to say. Thank you so much for having me on the show, and it was really a pleasure speaking with you.
It was a pleasure. It was very insightful to hear your thoughts. Just wrapping up, guys, on what we've talked about. Sahar Seher gave us brilliant ideas on how to start empathy from your home. If you really want a better society, it has to start from home. Like charity, like all good things in life, it all begins at home. So if you're a parent, if you're somebody who's wondering, how do I change the world for a better place? How do I make the world a better place? Start with your home. That's the best thing you can do. Once again, thank you so much, Seher, for joining us on the Daily Diary. And I hope that you continue to take on your positive messages forward.
Thank you so much. Take care. Bye bye.
Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe on our social media channels. Don't forget to watch us weekly on the Daily Diary with Mahwash Ajaz. Follow Ocean News. Stay tuned to Ocean News. Thank you so much for watching once again. Take care of yourself.